First and foremost, good seeing everybody. I hope you've all been well and kind of coming into the holiday season on a good note. Crystal, I'm sorry, I was going to go back a slide and I was going to read the opening intro or the intro slide. Thank you. Let me call through that real quick and then I'll move on. As always, for the moderated meeting instructions, you control the ability to unmute yourself through the Zoom menu. When the icon is red, has a line through it, you're obviously muted. Please do not use the hand raise feature. You can just jump in since we're a small informal group on this. As always, it's a lot easier if you stay muted when not speaking. That way we can minimize any distortion, background interference, things like that. During a call for the vote and after each presentation, you can unmute and members can vote as a group. We do have one action item, so I will be calling attention to that. If we do need to go into that, I can ask for a roll call vote, in which case I'll ask for your member, you as a member to then respond, and you can unmute and provide your designated vote on that. If you have poor quality internet, as always, you can turn off other programs, turn off the webcam, or connect directly to the internet rather than Wi-Fi. Lastly, our open meeting law disclaimer. While PAG RTA meetings are conducted virtually, we want to remind all the committee members that the meetings are open to the public. They're all tuning in through the YouTube connection and link that's been provided. Committee members are obligated to comply with all of our open meeting laws and only discuss the matters on the agenda during this public meeting. Pursuant to the state's open meeting law, committee members shall not discuss with a quorum of the committee at any time any matter that may be presented to the committee for discussion or action. Okay, let me do a quick roll call on everybody I had up. So I've got Jay Gomes as the committee member from ADOT, but I also have Carrie Wilcoxon and Saraja joining in. I've got Dion and Fausto from the town of Marana, Yaojian Wu from University of Arizona, Francisco, Greg, Blake from DTM, Cheryl from Oro Valley, and Tim Scott from Pima County. From the staff side, I've got Crystal, Jeff, Sonia, Nathan, Richard Nassy, Dave, Carolyn, Paul, Josh, Jeanette, Gabe, Hinsu, and Jamie. Is there anybody I've missed? And Michelle Montanino, I just saw you tuned in. And let's make sure. Is there anybody I didn't call out that is joined in?
Rick, I'm here too.
Jose, good deal. Thanks, man. Okay. Fantastic. And like I said, good seeing everybody. Thank you all for rearranging and be flexible around this. In-kind reporting. As you all know, regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording the time donated by the attendees, volunteers, and participants. We collect this data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities so that we can apply it for matching funds for grant and federal dollars. If you are paid for this activity with federal dollars, please let us know. Hearing none, time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by the PAG staff knowledgeable about the agenda and the meeting materials. And at the conclusion, a session report will automatically calculate the time spent on this meeting. Time spent working on these PAG and RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. Our first item up is, you guys remember that we do this on an annual basis. This is a presentation that Dave Mitchell provides. It's the latest and greatest on the annual projections from ADOT. So Dave, I'm going to turn it loose to you, let you run with this, and the floor is yours, my friend.
Good morning. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. My name is David Mitchell. I'm Senior Transportation Planner here for PAG. Today, I'm bringing forward an action item. I'm looking to bring the state performance targets through the, state performance projections through the committee process and ultimately for regional council adoption. Crystal, I don't seem to have control. Oh, there we go. Before we get into the state projections, a quick review on the regional strategies and goals, how we approach safety as a region through our policy. We have a safety plan vision that is we're working together towards zero fatalities on our roadways. We also have a plan goal, a safety plan goal, and that is to have annual reductions of at least 7% every year in fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. And that's something that we would evaluate and project every time we do the tip. So it's not something that expired after 5 years. It's something we continually do. And we also have safety goals within our long range plan. The RMAP has a Vision Zero mentality and ambition, and also some performance measures, which I have shown here. There are significant reductions required to meet our 2045 targets for fatalities and serious injuries, 25% reductions for fatalities and serious injuries. And for the rates of those totals, we want to see 45% drops for fatalities and serious injury rates. Even more ambitious goals for pedestrian and bicycles, 33% and 7% respectively. So you can see as a region, we are aspiring to significantly reduce the number of fatalities on our region's roadways. The state, as a federal exercise, part of the FAST Act, sets annual projections for crash safety performance measures. There's a group of 5 of them. They've been doing this since 2018, and consequently, PAG has supported and adopted the program and adopted the projections to assist and comply with the federal program. And today will be an action item on such. But as a quick review, the FAST Act, it's an ambitious program. It's a performance-based program that was based off of MAP 21, and there are several components, but one of the key components is safety. And every year we will be evaluating projections set by the state to apply towards our region. PAG supports the program by tracking the performance for our region and reporting it out. To make clear that these are projections, these are where the data is showing the trends. It is not the vetted goals of the public or the agencies. These are not the ambitious targets, if you will. The targets are used in the federal language. Sometimes there can be some confusion. There is no relation to the targets, the usage of targets in the federal language and the RMAP targets that PAG has adopted. PAG's targets are, in fact, long-term goals and are how we use to evaluate our performance. So again, just a quick review, a little bit more detail on that. The projections are based on 5-year historical data, and the projections are statewide, so they apply for all the regions, not just PAG. And no one region is significantly, is specifically called out in these performance reporting. PAG, the way that PAG uses these projections outside of supporting the program, we use them to evaluate our performance towards achieving our long-range 2045 targets. And we'll get into that shortly. But these are the 5 performance measures and the related projections that ADA has adopted. They did so on August 30th or 31st. I can't remember the end of the month of August. We have 6 months to comply by either adopting or creating our own projections. But this is how the measures that were set. So we're looking at unfortunate increases of 2% in both number of fatalities and fatality rate. Statewide, that's the figures that are shown are the statewide projections given those compounded increases. And those are, the methodology for that is to apply the 2% increase to 2020 totals, and then that will become a 2021 projection, and then to apply the 2% increase again to that to get your 22 projection. And then from that, you can calculate the 5-year average as shown in the far right column. They are projecting to see decreases in the number of serious injuries, the serious injury rate, and the bicycle and pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries. That's the last measure in the reference of non-motorized. That's our pedestrians and bicyclists. So to really understand what that means outside of supporting the program, PAG is taking a look at where does the region stand toward achieving our 2045 targets in relation to how the state is projecting our region to, or is projecting the state to perform. And we apply the statewide projection regionally to kind of get a ballpark estimate, a forecast, or just an estimate based on data that we can use to evaluate our actual performance. Because as it stands now, that we don't have a vetted process for doing so, or methodology that would be acceptable to forecast the unfortunate deaths of people and citizens of our region. So PAG does not have a process for that, so we kind of have been deferring to the state projections for that. And here's where we stand for total fatalities. There's a line that shows the actual performance measure. That's the 5-year average, and you can see our region and the solid black dots. Those are the actual values that those are the actual performance values for the region, and you can see that's unfortunately we are rapidly increasing. ADOT projects to see a slowing of that increase, and you see where, but you can see it's still increasing. And 2 years out, they're projecting us to land more than 150 deaths on our roadways as a 5-year average. As a year-to-year total, those are shown with the red diamonds. Those are the actual figures, and you can see they have sharply increased the last 3 years, which has explained the rapid increase in the rate for our region. The purple diamond or triangle on the right, that is where we need to be in order to be on pace to reach our 45 target. The way that we use benchmarking is we look at current data and then project out where would we need to be in 2 years in order to be on pace in 2045. So it's more of a year-over-year estimate. There's no science really outside of a trend line from current year data to where we would need to be at a 25% reduction from our 2015 value. So if we were to do benchmarking every year, the value could change. So that's just more of an evaluation tool, whereas these are real data points. So that's the distinction between those two types of data sets, is these are the actual performance measure, and these are the estimated value where we would need to be in order to be on pace with our 2045 target. So all that means is look at the data. Where do we stand? We are unfortunately way behind pace. As noted down here, we should be around 20% lower. Unfortunately, we're in the wrong direction. This is total fatalities. We offer the same analysis for fatality rate. Applying the state projection, we're looking at this is per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. We're looking at more than 1.5 deaths in our region as a 5-year average. Again, the red diamonds are the actual year-over-year averages. The state does again project to see a slowing of the rate. You saw there was a significant jump in between 2019 and 2020 that has caused the rate to really spike. But again, the region is not performing well enough in order to be on pace to achieve our target. For total serious injuries, we see the same type of analysis offered. There is a positive trend in terms of where we want to be. The graph is obviously declining, and that's where we would want serious injuries. We are well above pace to reach our 2045 target. ADOT projects to see an additional 7% decrease for 2022 projections. And we see that it also resulted into our serious injury rate. We are moving in the right direction and on pace for that one as well as a region. With the ADOT projection, we'll be below 5 serious injuries per 100 million VMT. If we were to compare that to our 2015 value, we were close to 7, to give you a perspective on how the region is performing in the last 7 years. And then for bicycle and peds, this is how the region is performing. The data right now is, as you can see, is inconsistent. It's hard to develop a year-over-year trend, but we could see that the rate had been increasing. ADOT is projecting to see a fortunate decrease of 1%, which barely puts us on pace. The values here, we would need to be at 118.7 in order to be on pace. We're just below that by 1/4 point. While we can easily say, hey, we're on pace, it could easily have been flipped on that. So that wraps up the state projections. I will open up to any questions, and then if there are none, we can move to vote. Chair, if that's all right with you.
One key thing to remember, Dave, make sure I say this right, that we, under the FAST Act requirements, we can't pass on this. We either have to adopt ADOTs or we would have to develop our own to submit. Did I say that correctly, Dave? And is that am I understanding correct as well?
The way I'll answer that is that the federal language is that once the state adopts their targets, the MPOs have 180 days to establish their own. That does not imply that we have to take specific action. It's just we would miss out on the opportunity to set our own targets under this program. Now, we could do it freelance if we want, but under this FAST Act program, we would not formally be able to adopt outside ones if we were to pass the 180-day window. That said, if we were to do nothing, by default, we automatically would be adopting the state targets. So no action is to adopt, taking action is to adopt or to not adopt. And if there is no recourse, if we were to not adopt, we would then be in the we didn't adopt. If you understand that conundrum.
I was going to say, I think it makes sense, and hopefully that didn't confuse everybody out there.
Yes, hopefully it didn't.
Yeah, want to make sure. Yeah, it's okay. Thank you for clarifying that. With that, are there any questions for Dave on both the items he covered as part of the FAST Act projections, as well as how it blended in with the RMAP goals and the safety elements that we've identified through that plan and the difference between the two? At this point in time, can entertain any questions.
Rick, I have a question if it's okay.
Go for it, Dion.
It's interesting to me that we're not on track for the fatalities, but for serious injuries, we seem to be on track to meeting the projections. And it would seem that we're not even close to meeting the fatalities projection or the goal of the RMAP. So why is it? What's going on that we're able to be on track for serious injuries, but not for fatalities?
Well, I'll take a short summary type stab, and Gabe, if you want to chime in with more details and follow up. But what could be happening is once we're serious injury accidents have now turned fatal, we can look at that by analyzing the types of crashes. And what are we seeing? We're seeing fatalities caused by higher speeds and such. So while we can't and don't have a straight answer, at least I don't have a straightforward answer, but it could be in explaining the type of shift rather than the behavior of the design of our roadways, so to speak, but more of the behavior of the drivers. Gabe, would you like to chime in?
Sure, I'll echo what you just said, Dave. As far as the behavior of drivers, I think is a major contributing factor. In the last year and a half to 2 years, we've seen a huge uptick in substantial aggressive driving. In addition to lack of consistent enforcement within the city itself, I think is contributing to those negative behaviors. But as far, Dion, I mean, it's a really good question, and I don't have an answer for you either. If you were to ask me what I think would happen if fatality rates going up, then serious injury would be going up, because serious injuries could theoretically very easily become a fatality, or vice versa, right? They're a hair's breadth sometimes between those types of crashes, between those injury severities. So yeah, long story, I don't have a good answer for you either, but behavior and high speeds, you're spot on, Dave. That has a major impact.
Carrie, I see you're in the call and the discussion as well. Would you care to join in? I see your hands up on this.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for calling on me. I will lower my hand now, but yeah, we see that obviously across. These are projections across the state. My section developed them, and they're similar to what we're seeing throughout the rest of the country as well. And the working hypothesis right now is that we do believe speeds are up on average, and we believe that the ramifications are being felt most keenly in three groups of people: outside vehicle pedestrians, bicyclists, non-motorized, who are getting hit by those higher speed vehicles, the motorcyclists, and then also unbelted occupants of vehicles. So we believe that if you stay in the vehicle, if you're in the vehicle and you stay in the vehicle during a collision, vehicle design and occupant behavior are driving those downward trends as far as serious injuries. All the other things aside, pedestrian crashes, they can and do turn fatal, as well as bicycle crashes very quickly. But we are seeing that if people stay in their vehicles, they're belted, or they don't come out, they're unbelted, but they don't come out, they're faring a lot better than they would or have been historically. And so I like to point, even though the data is not conclusive yet, but I like to point to seatbelt use as a public health win for both our agencies, all the safety groups, but also for the federal government and the manufacturers of vehicles. So we don't have a full answer yet, but we believe that it comes down to the fact that more people are belted and more people are staying in their vehicles when they're involved in collisions.
Dion, does that answer your question, or at least give you some better insight on it?
It does. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. Any other questions for Dave?
Hey, Rick,
Yeah, Jose?
question for you. What
Go
are the
for it.
ramifications or repercussions if obviously we're not meeting some of these goals that we set for ourselves? I mean, what happens at the end?
The state ADOT is the only one that will be evaluated under this program. So even if we aren't meeting the projections that I showed you are not officially ADOT's projections. That is applying the ADOT rate to our region's data. So we will not be evaluated on anything that you saw on the slides today. Additionally, if the state does not perform well, the region does not have any direct ramifications. That is all handled up at the state level and is tied to the Highway Safety Improvement Program funding. Outside of that, there are no ramifications for not meeting projections per se.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome, Jose.
Any other questions from any other committee members? With that, then I would like to entertain a motion from a committee member that we recommend adoption of the ADOT statewide transportation safety projections. This would then be shared with the subsequent committees. As Dave mentioned, the ultimate approval is by the regional council, correct, Dave? So it goes through TPC at their upcoming meeting and then on to regional council. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It'll be at TPC next week, and then management committee and regional council in January.
In the January cycle?
January, January, February, whatever the dates turn out to be.
Perfect. So yeah, we're recommendations. So entertain a motion that we recommend adoption. We recommend adoption of the ADOT statewide transportation safety projections. I'll take a motion from anybody.
Rick, quick question here. If we do nothing, isn't it the same as adopting?
Dave, do you want to cover that again? If I understood you correctly, Paul's correct on that, right?
That is correct. And in fact, that was a technicality that we had last year. However, from a public viewpoint standpoint, I believe it's good to have a formal adoption of such, if that's what our intent is anyhow. In addition, part of participating in the program and the federal requirement is that we do report out on such measures. So whether or not we adopt the projections, we would still have to report out in our own policy on how the region is performing on those 5 specific measures.
In addition, when the discussion comes up at the subsequent meetings that I mentioned, either the TPC management and ultimately the regional council, there is oftentimes questions, or it's included in the presentation as to what the practitioners recommended on this particular topic or on this particular issue. So we have been asked, what's our assessment on this and what did this committee endorse, which we have in the past.
Rick, this is Dion.
Yes.
I seem to remember, maybe it was last year or maybe it was 2 years ago, that maybe there was a different word than projections being used. Maybe the word was target, and that was problematic because we were targeting higher rates of injuries or fatalities, as the case may be. So my question for you is, I can envision that the regional council would look at what might be perceived as a lack of improvement in terms of safety and having concerns about that. And therefore, this committee, I think one of the reasons maybe nobody's offering a motion is because we're concerned that we would have to somehow back up the fact that we're not endorsing, so to speak, a safer roadway. So can you comment on that?
I am, Dave, I'm going to ask to Dion's first point. If I remember correctly as well, there was a vernacular change I seem to recall the same thing a couple of years ago. It was goals or targets was kind of the confusion, and we replaced it with projections. Is that correct? Or Paul, either one of you that wants to jump in on that?
Yeah, I could I'll go first. I see Paul's at the ready, but yeah, the target was the original FAST Act language. I believe in 2018 when it first came to through our committee process, we were still using that term. Since that point, I've been using the term projections to try and clearly put a separation between those two types of data types and data points and data uses to be specific. And there's been some recommendations to use terms. I think the city of Tucson last year recommended the term predictions. There's been forecasts, a lot of estimates, a lot of different terms have been thrown out there. But that all it really is doing is indicating that there's a symptom out there.
There's a trend.
There's a trend. to answer the second question and also come back to the first is traditionally there has not been an issue with adopting these targets with management committee supporting and then regional council adopting. The concerns have been in transportation committee. City of Tucson has taken the stance that it conflicts with the Vision Zero mentality and has in the last two cycles, and Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe the third, but the last two, they have not voted in support of adopting, but we've had otherwise full support from the other members.
And to expand on, to expand on that, Dion, that's how I believe it's been presented and how we viewed it is, this is data trend lines. These are not desired outcomes. These are not desired goals. They're not targets that we're endorsing. And we're saying we acknowledge that the data shows these trend patterns. And that's it. That's as far as we've gone. And we're doing that in response to requirements as part of the FAST Act. Completely separate from that discussion are what our own individual or what PAG's efforts are in regards to safety arena, as well as what the individual jurisdictions. So to me, they are completely different efforts. And I think we've highlighted that and made note that there is different nomenclature to reflect those differences in there. Paul, did you want to add anything to that? Or did I hit that pretty well?
Well, actually,
that was
if
the
I
point
may-
I wanted to be made, is that these are not aspirational. These are where ADOT expects the numbers to be in calendar 2022. So what Dave has shown are the aspirational targets that were laid out in RMAP, which are where we would like to be trending with safety performance in comparison to where ADOT expects the numbers to be in calendar 2022. So we're going to continue to track the performance and keep focus on trying to track toward that target that we set in the long range RMAP, but we're going to report the projections of where the state anticipates or projects numbers to be for the upcoming calendar years.
So the reflective efforts on us when it comes to safety efforts, all those RBAPs, all the activity, this is not going to be changed by that. Those are our self-driven, identified goals, things we see and hold dear and dear to us, and we want to still continue to see improvements on that. Prediction trends and timelines and data points are independent of that effort.
And the more proactively we track that, the more opportunity there could be to revisit it. If we are way off trend for getting to the target that we identified in the long range plan, perhaps that is impetus to revisit it. And so we want to make sure that we are showing what's going on in terms of our progress toward the target that we set in the long range RMAP. And that includes consideration of where ADOT expects the numbers to be in the upcoming calendar year.
And to add on top of that, if you were to compare where we stood in 2018, even last year, we did not use any benchmarking or any type of way of using the projections to evaluate our process. In fact, using those projections to assign whether or not we're on pace for our map projections, that's not part of the FAST Act process. That's the evolution, Dion, of how it used to be to how we're trying to say, how can we use this data and the adoption of this, how can we use the FAST Act program to better inform our decision making? The benchmarking process had only been done on a 5-year cycle as we do our long range updates. This new one is introducing a 1-year benchmarking cycle. Every year we would be producing new benchmarking and reevaluating our stance. And that's how we can use PAG tools and skill sets and the projections to inform our committee members and our leaders and our community of not only how is the state performing, how the region is performing compared to the state, but also how are we performing in relation to our own goals and targets. And so I believe that the way that PAG now approaches it compared to where we were a few years ago is using the program to better the region, in spite of what the data is showing. So I believe that regional council also sees it that way. I do not believe that they see the results of the measure to be reflective on the actions in this program.
Paul and Dion, you both had a kind of question that was intertwined around that, but did that get to both of your points? Paul Burton?
Yes.
Dion?
Yes, and thank you everybody for your explanations. And so I am prepared to move that this committee accept the FAST Act safety performance projections for the PAG region, and also acknowledge the efforts that PAG makes towards making the region safer, and to continue to do that as well.
Okay, got a motion from Dion. Can I have a second? Get a second from anybody?
This is Richard Nassy. If I'm allowed to second, I'll second it.
Okay. Okay. All in favor? You simply say yes, because I'm going to see if I can get these. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed, say nay. Okay, I got a motion passes unanimously. Dave, thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you for the additional clarification and explanations. Paul, you as well. Terrific information to send in response to what obviously is a frustrating topic to the group. Thank you for putting up with that. Thank you for chasing through with that. We do recognize this kind of contradicts what every single one of us hold near and dear, which is we want to make it better, and how do we get there? And that distinction that we talked about with Dion's question, I think is critical to note. This is not aspirational. It's not where we want to be. It's recognizing, though, there is data that is trending in a way we don't like, and how do we deal with that? So thank you guys very much. Okay, next item up is a report, and good segue into our safety activities. Gabe, the floor is all yours, my friend. Why don't you start with the RSA efforts and activities, if you would, and recap on what we got going on there.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been busy this fall with RSA activities. We have completed Grant Road design RSA phases 5 and 6. That RSA has been completed. The report has been done and turned into the city. We also completed an RSA at the intersection of Congress and Grande. That we got some good TPD involvement on that, a good group effort. We were partly remote, partly in the field. That report is getting put together right now, working with Darlene and the team on that. On deck, we have a road safety assessment for Western Way for Pima County. We're going to be doing that in mid-January with our team. And then following that, we're going to be working on the Grant Road UP design when they're at around 30%. So we'll be busy into, gosh, at least February for what we have right now. However, as always, I always want to make a plug for any of our member jurisdictions on the line to make use of us. I'm glad that they have been making use of us. We appreciate that, but we're here as a team to help you out and to address any of your safety concerns, whether it be from a design plan standpoint or existing infrastructure standpoint or beyond. So,
and as a reminder to that, this can be custom sized, custom fit, and tailor made to your circumstances and situations. A design RSA on a $30 million roadway is obviously going to look, taste, and feel radically different than a much smaller one. And we've got the ability, Gabe and his team completely adjust around whatever your needs or particular situation is. So it is not a one size fits all approach.
Absolutely. We also have the mini RSAs when it's typically a smaller issue and you just want somebody to go out there maybe just for a day and and give a smaller memo. It doesn't need to be a big report. It's not a giant corridor project, et cetera. That's typically me and Richard. We can go out there and knock that out. So anyway, just keep us in mind, and we're here to serve. So Safety Explorer, we've been making good progress on that. We have a meeting immediately following this, actually, with some beta testers to get their input. We sent out a survey of sorts to get their input on the functionality of the platform. And yeah, Josh, do you want to jump in and add to that where we're at right now with Safety Explorer?
We're getting closer. Yeah, I think you touched on it. We got some initial functionality out and seeking some feedback, and there are a couple of other enhancements that that are still in the works, but want to get some of the updates out to this group. Ideally, when's the next TSS meeting? Would that be February or January?
I'm targeting February right now.
Okay.
Yeah, February 10th. So I get back on track with the second Thursday of the month is what I'm eyeballing.
So we'll definitely have materials ready for that to give a little bit of an overview and orientation on the new functionality.
I'm assuming, Rick, that we'll probably have enough that it can be its own standalone agenda item that Josh and I or whoever can speak to.
Materials for
not as part of my report, but a standalone, but a separate item.
Standalone.
Is that too ambitious, Josh?
No.
Okay, I'll pencil it in and plan on it, guys.
Great.
Okay.
Any questions on Safety Explorer? For the HSIP call for projects update, I'm going to throw it right over to you, Carrie, if you don't mind giving us an update on when you think anticipated timeline, what that's going to look like, and if you and your team are getting closer to issuing that call.
Thanks, Gabe. Can you guys hear me okay?
Got you loud and
Yes.
clear.
All right. Yeah. So we have been working with our finance group to get ready to launch the next HSIP call for projects. This would be for fiscal year 25 and 6. The initial or the expected date of the announcement will be January 10th, 2022. And we will, I believe there's going to be a 6-month period to actually turn in applications for the HSIP funding cycle. Like most years, it will be we're looking at about $40 million a year for the 2 years. So about $80 million in funds to spend. But also, like most years, we're trying to make sure that we improve the process. Most of you heard me speak at various times about some of the challenges we get or we have with the HSIP. Some of them are, or a lot of them have to do with lack of scoping, which as a former HSIP applicant with the city of Phoenix, I know exactly what that's about. You submit a project that you think looks good on paper, but unless you've actually designed and built and project managed a project, you may not actually know all the details or have all the details involved in the costs and things like that. So we're trying to run all the applications, both from local agencies and from ADOT itself, through a vetting process to make sure that the projects are priced out the way they should be. And just to give you some rough example, we know that any project, there's a minimum requirement of $250,000 for a project, which is excessively high, I think. But when you think about getting a consultant on board with ADOT, it's already about $120,000 to $150,000 to begin with, and then any project that you want to build after that is, it's going to be more expensive due to the federal dollars involved or the federal requirements. That being said, we're getting a lot of projects that have really good benefit cost ratios on paper. But when you dig down into the actual project itself and how it was priced out, there's a lot of holes in it. And so we're ending up with projects that we have to find more money for when we go to build them or design them even. And that affects the benefit cost ratio. It affects how competitive they are up front. And it sets up, although I don't think there's any overt intention of this, but it sets up for an opportunity to I don't want to say game the system, but the incentive is to get your projects into ADOT approved with the highest benefit cost ratio. If the cost is based on faulty judgment, then you may have a higher benefit cost ratio than a project that had maybe a more thorough vetting on the local level. So we're trying to make sure that we use all the resources we have in ADOT to look through those projects and make sure that they are all appropriately scoped and priced out at the beginning. The other issue we're trying to get a handle on is interim measures being budgeted out to fiscal year 25 and 26. Any project that you or any other safety professional identifies today means that it will be a minimum of 4 to 5 years before the project is built, meaning that whatever safety problem you see on the road today won't have a solution for 4 to 5 years. So we're working on how to figure out or how to implement interim solutions, striping, signing, low-cost measures that you can actually put down today that may help until you get a more permanent solution. And then finally, we're trying to make sure that we implement a couple of new programs along the way. We are developing more thoroughly developing our project selection process for pedestrian related safety projects and for wildlife vehicle collision projects. For the pedestrian safety, we want to make sure that people are not just jumping to the most expensive solution first, the hawk. We want to make sure that that there actually is a pedestrian pathway there. There is a pedestrian travel pattern, and that we're trying to address it with interim measures as well. We're not saying no to hawks, but we want to make sure that we're trying to address it with as low cost of measure first as possible. And then for wildlife vehicle collisions, we're trying to figure out how to federally fund through the HSIP program countermeasures that would be geared at reducing the likelihood of a wildlife vehicle collision. Many of you know that a lot of the studies on the countermeasures for wildlife vehicle collections are actually not on the CMF clearinghouse. And that is primarily just because the wildlife vehicle collision stuff seems to be generated primarily in the game and fish area, and CMFs are generated in the traffic safety. So we're trying to figure out a way to use the peer-reviewed data that was developed under game and fish to fund or to develop a funding mechanism for wildlife vehicle collision countermeasures. Not that we're going to be purposely funding a bunch of those, but we want to make sure that those at least can be competitive with other safety countermeasures. So in any event, we are working out the details. We are planning on releasing it January 10th, releasing the call for project January 10th. As I said, there'll be about a 6-month period where the applications are being reviewed, or they can be submitted at any time before the final acceptance. And then we would do a final call or a final ranking sometime at the end of 2022 or early 2023. And like all of the previous HSIP calls for projects, at least since I've been here, there'll be a representative from each of the MPOs and COGs on the voting committee. So we're getting better at this every year we do it. It's been a long and painful process, but we are hoping that the process is fair to everybody. The other thing that I should also point out, if I have a few more minutes, and I actually have no idea how much time I have, I'll just ramble on though. But one of the things that we've been working with Rick and some of the people from PAG actually is a way to more efficiently spend our HSIP dollars. And what that looks like is around this time every year, when a project is getting ready to, or for any project that is scheduled to start design in the next fiscal year, so in June 30th of the next fiscal year, or July 1st, we start sending out notices to the locals saying, hey, get your project initiation packet in, get your project initiation packet in. And it kind of drags on and on and on. And it comes down to the point where, for instance, in March of this year, in April, we had projects that were scheduled to start in fiscal 21, that hadn't even been initiated yet. That process takes about 6 months, or can take about 6 months. And at the end, what happens is when the project doesn't get initiated in the year it's budgeted, it gets bumped, which is unfortunate because these are good projects, and they get bumped to another year, but it opens up a hole in our budgeting process. So what we're trying to do, and one of the things that Rick had asked us to look at, was the possibility of finding out which projects are not likely to be obligated in the year that they were budgeted for, and to come up with a more timely method of getting that information out to all the COGs and MPOs in the state and say, hey, we've got about $10 million worth of projects that they're just not going to go this year. Do you have projects that have already been budgeted that can be brought forward? So what we're hoping to do is use that as an opportunity to pull some maybe high benefit cost ratio projects that are budgeted out 2 or 3 years in advance, pull them in and get those projects started early, taking advantage of the budgetary hole that's opened up when a project does not get obligated in the design year. So we actually had a meeting on this last week, and I think that was about the 4th meeting. There's a lot of interest in this from ADOT's perspective. It makes the whole program run much more smoothly, and we think we can get this actually going this fiscal year, or actually we're trying to figure out if we can do it this current fiscal year or the one that's coming up. But regardless, we're trying to figure out a way that there's a date by which people have to get their projects initiation packets in. And if they don't, they get bumped, and that we issue a call to the other COGs and MPOs and ask them if they want to move projects forward. We would do that based on available funds. We would do that based on benefit cost ratio first. But we would give the COGs and MPOs more time to take advantage of this. If by January 1st, we know that $10 million of projects for the next fiscal year is likely not to be available, it would be nice from the COG and MPO standpoint to be aware of that and start preparing projects when and if we say at the end of March, hey, these projects aren't going to go this year. We've got $10 million of HSIP money or HSIP obligation authority for this year. Do you have a project that you can move in? So that gives people a little bit more opportunity to maybe prepare the waters. There's no guarantee that that'll happen, but at least it'll give you an opportunity to get your projects in order prior to June 30th, or in this case, March and April of the year that the projects are actually supposed to go to project or go to design. So that's the HSIP update. Any questions?
Gary, along those lines, because if I remember from our discussions before, the that happens on a regular basis. It pretty much happens every single year, is that there's some dollars that just can't be obligated or authorized for whatever reason.
Right.
So it's an annual thing, and just you're identifying ways and saying, okay, rather than just deal with it, we want to proactively try to use this to our advantage and see if we can minimize the damage from this. My safe, that's safe statement.
That's correct. And you know what we're also trying to do is just make sure that because what obviously happens is that you know April of 2022 rolls around, or 2021 rolled around, and there were X number of projects that hadn't been obligated and weren't going to initiate in that fiscal year. So ADOT scrambles to find projects that we can use the money on, which is fine. I mean, that's what we have to do. What is less fine is the fact that we may pull a crappier project forward than is maybe on the ranking with that's a local project, simply because by that time there's just not enough time for the locals to react and say, yeah, we can get the project ready by June 30th. So we're trying to figure out how to make it give everyone a little more time, and how to make the process a little bit more a little bit less chaotic.
Jamie and Carolyn, the reason this is important, and I know you guys have plugged in starting, I think it was last cycle or last fiscal year, we started tightening up a lot of our coordination with you through the TIP efforts. So we're going to probably want to make sure that you, me, Gabe, are all touching base on this, because I think it's a great opportunity. Carrie's right on with this. This is something that if you get enough of a heads up notice, especially the two CA agencies that have the ability to kind of go a little quicker on some of these jobs, because once you get it obligated, Carrie, make sure I still say this correctly. Once you get it obligated, then we're free and clear. Then we have time to be able to spend it. You don't have to blow it all at once. You just got to get that obligation request started. And once you can get that going, be it design or whatever else, now the ball's in motion, correct?
That's correct. I mean, there is a limit. I think it's 10 years, but none of the projects in your area have a problem with that.
If you're running a safety problem and takes longer than 10 years, yeah, we're going to have a delivery discussion more than we are a programming discussion. So Jamie, Carolyn, we'll definitely keep you guys in the mix, if that makes sense. I see you're both on this call. So we're going to want to keep you side by side in that conversation, if that's okay with both of you.
Yes, Rick, thank you for including us.
Yeah, I think this is good stuff, and we've been making progress. Carrie, thanks for continuing to chase that out. This is one I think has got some real potential, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you guys for bringing up for pushing it, really.
Okay.
Carrie, I have a question for you, a couple of questions for you. As far as the call for projects itself, is it going to be the same process where there's going to be, we incorporate in initial scoping for the application itself? I mean, are you going to have steps and processes with some of your staff to be able to take a look and see if what things are eligible or what not, or if things need to be massaged in the application so they would be fully eligible? That's something that we did the last time, and it was very helpful to help member agencies know whether or not they should be going for this or they should not be going for this, or if they need to make a slight modification and then they're fine, etc.
Yeah, we'll be doing that again this year.
Okay, fantastic. Since another question, since we're going to be doing this over the course of the first half of 2022, are we going to be assuming that we're just looking at data through 2020, because that's what's going to be complete and available to us?
You can we allow people to use the most recent data. The problem is, as everyone on the phone knows, we don't actually finalize our data until June. Or the May-June timeframe of the following year. So,
exactly.
But certain agencies, ADOT can and does, extend it, and we've allowed that for other people as well. Other agencies, we're still looking at 5 years. You're just looking at the most recent 5 years, and you always run the risk if you're using incomplete data of missing something. So. We allow it, but there is that risk.
Okay. And are you still going to be, you're anticipating, I know this will be part of the call, but just as a heads up for the group, are we still going to be using a BC ratio with fatal and incapacitating crashes as your primary metric for judging and scoring applications?
Yes.
Okay.
Is Foster Burrell, Town of Marana. So we have an HSIP project coming up this next fiscal year for design and the following year for construction. Were you, where do we get that initiation packet? And do I work through PAG for this, or how is it going to pursue after that? As we are not an agency that can obviously run with it ourselves.
And Fausto, you said that's for fiscal year 22 is when the design starts?
No, 23.
Is it fiscal year 23 is when the design starts? That's when the funds are available?
Yeah, fiscal year 23 design, 24 build.
Right, so that would be something that you would, we can send you the specifics on what is needed for the initiation packet. It does go through the MPO. The biggest thing for the locals is always the match, if it's a project that requires a match. But a lot of times nowadays, especially, it is bandwidth as far as having people who can actually work on the project. But that would be a good example. You'll probably be getting, if you have a project in 23, you will probably be getting a very ominously worded email from my section later this week, saying that you need to get your obligation packet started, and there'll be a link to, not obligation, your authorization packet, initiation packet, excuse me. The initiation packet, there'll be a link to the documents you need. But what we're trying to do, again, in line with getting people to initiate early, is to start hitting them. We normally start hitting them about this time of year. What we have been talking about in recent years, because the other thing that's almost always a problem is the IGA. And it's a problem in the sense that it just takes a lot of time. So for instance, you are initiating a project in April for that year, that fiscal year. You may not physically have enough time to get the IGA signed, get it approved by your board, and then get it approved by the State Transportation Board before you run out of time. So what we're trying to do, first of all, with this upcoming year, FY 23, we're trying to get people to send in their initiation packets as early as possible. But going forward, what we're kicking around is the idea of when a local agency gets approved for a project, and like next year when we come up with the final listing and send out your approval letters for 25 and 26, we immediately go to the IGA, so that we don't actually have to wait for that when a project comes due. And when it does come due, you've already got the IGA in place, and you at least that is not a process you have to worry about. So you should be getting an email from us. I don't know where they go to, who they go to, but you should be getting an email from ADOT later this week, advising you that we would like you to start your initiation packet.
And Fausto, along those lines, I'll reach out and follow up with you and bring in Carolyn, JP, and some of our folks and Gabe, and we'll talk through that. Carrie, I assume when you talk about the initiation package, that's the request that we make through the LPA section to get them plugged in, get it assigned, and get their PM, all that good stuff.
That's correct.
Yep. So Fausto, I'll follow up with you and we'll try to get that on our radar screen so we can get going on that, get all the balls in motion, and I get that identified. So I'll be in touch. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Paul C, I saw you had your hand up. Did you want to add, what do you got that you wanted to add on that?
I think you got it, Rick. I just wanted to be clear that I think Carrie referenced it having to go through the MPO. For the most part, we've done that process. The funding is programmed in the TIP. Mm-hmm. We have provided assistance in getting the initiation package exchange underway. There have also been other circumstances where the local agency has just gone directly to ADOT. So I just wanted to be clear that as far as we're concerned, we've done what we need to do as part of the PAG process. if we want to help out the initiation process, it sounds like you guys are going to step into that. So that's great.
Perfectly said. Thank you for reaffirming that. That's exactly what we'll do. So Fausto, we'll be in touch and we'll jump on something with you.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're trying to get our ducks in a row too. So we're anxious to get this one going.
Perfect. We'll provide some aid on that. Okay. Any other questions for Gabe and Carrie on this topic, covering any of the three items between RSA, Safety Explorer, and the HSIP component?
I have additional questions
Go for it.
for you, Carrie.
Gabe, I thought that there was a limit on number of questions that any guest could be asked.
His performance
The limit
evaluation
is
is coming up. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
The limit is 20, unfortunately, for you, Carrie. 20. So I think we're down 4. I think we got 16 left. So just strap in, enjoy, get a Mai Tai, something. Question for you. So we're talking about fiscal years 25 and 26, and you said you're anticipating approximately 40 million per year.
That's correct.
Is this so? In the past years, ADOT's had a giant chunk of HSIP money, and then they carve out a subset of that to be competitive for statewide for jurisdictions around the state. Is that what's happening here again? And if so, what's the total amount before that carve out of that 40 million per those 2 fiscal years each?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. And it's also something that I didn't really touch on because it's still a work in process. But $40 million in round numbers is about what we get to spend every year. We get 44 million in federal authorization, or I think it's called apportionment. Not to get too technical, but we actually don't get $44 million to spend. We get $40 million to spend. That 4 million extra is supposed to be pulled out of other federal aid projects, but we never do because we're spending our federal aid project. We ADOT spend our federal aid projects money for bridge and for other things on those programs. So we don't actually have it, but we start with 40 million that we're authorized that we actually get HSIP funds for. What we have been doing in the last 5 years, or I guess actually since I've been with ADOT, we pulled out about 10% of that, 10% of whatever is available. And we've been pulling that or calling that emergency funds. And basically what that means is they get spent on cost overruns, but they don't get spent, I don't think, equitably on cost overruns because I think most of that money ends up going into ADOT projects. So what we've been talking about this year is putting aside the same amount, 10%, and calling it program but unplanned or something like that. They're PUP funds, basically. And what we're giving some visibility to it because in the past they've kind of been lumped in with all the unspent HSIP funds, and if there was extra money, people would be able to pull from that, and that's how it goes. We're putting that aside. We're trying to put that aside, those PUP funds aside. And we're also trying to make sure that we, the HSIP program, have more visibility on it so that when a project comes up that is either an emergency project, we didn't know about it when we did the call for projects, and it's a legitimate project, regardless of where it is, whether it's a state or local system, we have the ability to spend on that. Or if there's a legitimate a cost overrun, again, whether it's a state or local project, we'd be able to use money from that. But the PUP funds, the 10% will be pulled aside again this year. The bigger impact, though, to the 40 million that I mentioned is projects that were programmed for construction in 1 year, but ran over, or in other words, they got bumped for some reason. So they get pushed into the next year, or there are other issues with projects that are getting constructed and they end up pulling money from the FY25. So we don't end up with exactly 40 million every year. We end up with something less for that first year. And then we would pull the 10% off of that for the PUP funds. But that being said, another issue that we're dealing with, and this has to do with all projects, is good projects are typically going to spend more money on construction than design. And since construction is always in its second year, we don't usually have a problem spending the money in the second year, but we do have a problem spending the money in the first year, because the first year is just design. And again, that gives an opportunity for how do we take advantage of some of those unspent funds or unauthorized funds. So we're trying to work out those issues as well, to make sure that we're spending the money fairly, spending the money equally, and getting projects on the ground as quickly as possible. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thanks, Gary. Only 15 more to go.
Yeah. Okay, good.
So in the past, our team, and then later you and your team, would point out and track the funding disparity between what was HSIP money was spent on with ADOT facilities versus local roads, those numbers versus where the crashes are happening on ADOT facilities versus local roads. And there was a little bit of a flip flop. I think it was like 80-20 ADOT getting the HSIP funding versus the locals getting the funding, but where the crashes were happening was 20% on ADOT facilities and 80% on the local roads. It's been a while since I've seen those numbers, so that's ballpark. So take that with a grain of salt. Is your team continuing to track that, and has that gotten better? Has that started to even out over the last few years? Because I know that was a priority for you, and you were working to try and flatten those disparities.
Yeah, it is. It's a good question. Thank you. Thanks for bringing it up. You're right on the spending. In the olden days, about 80% of the HSIP funds were spent by ADOT on state roads. But if you look at where people are being injured and killed, it was about 60% was happening on the local roads, a little over 60%, and the rest was happening on the state roads. So over apart from kind of simplifying the HSIP funding process, one of the best outcomes of the statewide competition is the fact that the ratios of HSIP spending have shifted more in favor of the locals. They're still not exactly where we'd like them to be. If you were just to do a toss up, you would say probably, you'd want them matching the 60-40, 60% going on locals, 40% on ADOT, to match where the fatal and serious injury crashes are occurring. Arguably, it could be a little bit higher on the locals than the actual HSIP or than the actual fatal and serious, just based on the capacity to by ADOT to develop or more different projects and different funding streams. But that's what we're shooting for, to make a parity there, 60-40.
Great. Yeah, and I don't think you're going to get a pitch perfect match between 60-40 and 60-40, but it's good to be working toward that. Is that something that you think, just knowing what the spending levels are, knowing what those numbers have been for like the last 5 years, is that something that you could maybe provide me and the TSSS to see like where those numbers are from the last few years, if that's how much better it has gotten?
Sure. Yeah. We present on this about every year at the Roads and Streets. I can have them update the most recent numbers. I don't think we presented this year, but I can have them update that and send it out to you. And if you'd like, we can actually present at your next TSSS meeting.
That's fantastic. That'd be great. Thanks, Gary. One last question. I promise it's not painful.
Okay. And by the way, Gabe, my understanding of the rules of this meeting is that unasked questions do not get rolled over.
Funny you should say that. Are you
Said that as
anticipating
challenge accepted.
are you anticipating any additional federal funding to come down the pike for safety funding with the recent spending bills that are pending and have been passed?
Yeah, we are, but we don't know what that is at this point, and we don't know what the obviously what the dollars are going to look like. But we are expecting more money, and we are expecting better flexibility with that. We just don't know what the rules are going to be right now.
Understood. Great. Well, we definitely want an update on that. Whenever you and your team find that out, we're very curious about that. That'd be great.
Sounds good.
And I'm done.
Wow. Okay. Well, now that we
Thanks,
have
Gary.
10 minutes left in the meeting, any other questions besides Gabe for any of the safety items covered?
Can't you just permanently mute him?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think somebody's going to be busy at the next 5 meetings, so don't worry
You
about it.
have no idea how many people have asked that question over the years, Carrie, of me specifically.
Oh yeah, throw everybody else under the bus. I see how this rolls. Okay.
Hey,
All right.
this is Blake Olafson here. Thanks for the information, Carrie. I have to ask, did you get your EGs yet?
Did we get my EGs?
Yeah.
I was down in Tucson about a month ago, and I stopped by EGs and got my fill. So that was good. And actually, on the way out of Roads and Streets, or an RSA I had out there, I stopped by as well. So I've gotten EGs twice in the last 6 months. So I'm good for now, but I'm always optimistic that there'll be another one opening up in the area.
All right, and actually, I did seriously. Can Rick or Gabe fill us in? The last time we spoke about this topic, HSIP, I was told that there would be consultant support from PAG on applications. Is that still going to be the case? We really appreciate that service if it's available.
Absolutely, yes. That is the plan going forward. And we're laying the groundwork for that now to make sure that we're able to provide some good guidance to you all to where maybe you are having some issues and problems that could be addressed through the HSIP call for projects.
Okay, excellent. And I did just want to let Carrie know that on our previous round, we were permitted to include crashes that hadn't been released yet from your system by including the police reports, and we do appreciate that leeway. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we want to make sure that you're getting, these projects are identified and budgeted for as early as possible.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Great update, great discussion, and good to hear all that information coming. We'll keep you posted as this progresses. You will probably see or hear from Gabe then in January as this rolls out before we have our next TSSS meeting. So keep eyes and ears open on that as we get into the new year. Moving on to our standing item for communications updates and activities. Francisco, I'll go ahead and start with you with City of Tucson. What's going on in your the world when it comes to all the communications efforts you're working with?
We're pretty much same as last meeting. We're waiting for federal funds to start the replacement of the WiMAX network and installation of fiber. So that's where we're at right now.
Got it. I'll follow up with you offline for the scheduling of what you've got calendar for that MOU to get before your mayor and council.
Okay.
We'll go from there. Okay. Tim or Michelle, what do you got from the county side?
Not much has changed in our regard. We still have all of our signals connected through the MyoVision cellular connections.
Okay. Seeing MyoVision. Okay. Cheryl or Jose from Morro Valley?
GJ, did you have anything?
Or GJ? Sorry.
No, I have nothing.
Okay. Dion Fausto from Marana.
I don't have any updates. We're working on coordination with our IT department, and that's slow going, but I think we're going to probably have some good news maybe next time we meet that I could report.
Fantastic. Okay. Paul, Sarita.
There's been no change down here.
Okay. And lastly, ADOT, Jay.
Let's see, updates. We're getting closer to getting signals connected between Valencia and Houghton along I-10. That'll be all radio connections, point to point. I do need to get with Francisco so we can figure out how to decommission the old max use server that we have under the stack. And so that'll be some upcoming work. Need to figure out scope, schedule, and budget. So that's all I got.
Okay. Any questions from any of the members for any of the jurisdictions on that? Okay. Last item I've got is update on the equipment purchasing. You guys remember earlier this year, we went through a prioritization discussion process, all that to take the federal funds that have been allocated on behalf of the RTA's traffic signal program. So we've been working on processing that. MOUs are in process of being approved by the various mayors and councils or awaiting signatures from our end. So those balls are all in motion for the jurisdictions that did submit and that we had approved. Once done, I'll be working with our PAG side of the house and the TIP managers on that to get the TIP amendment done. And then immediately following that, we're going to have the detailed discussion with ADOT, the LPA section, local public agency section, seeing what steps we've got to do to get balls in motion, IGAs, obviously what's going to be required out of the CA agencies as well. So those will be forthcoming activities. Cheryl, I recall you had mentioned you still wanted to be part of those discussions, even though you're not a recipient of that at this time. You still wanted me to include you in all those meetings and discussions. Is that still correct?
Correct.
Got it. So we have not hit the major milestones. We just have all the necessary logistic work that's ongoing for that. And all those efforts are currently and still remain underway, but we are making progress on that. So I know it's a short, sweet update, but yeah, fortunately a good one still. That is all we've got on the agenda, and that brings us to the end. Any follow-up questions on any of the items we've covered, gone over, or any questions that anybody wanted to clarify on any of the items we've discussed? Okay. Hearing none, then if everybody could pencil and block out our next target meeting would be Thursday. We're going to get back on our regular track. So thank you guys for the adjustment we had to make in this meeting for this month. It's December, and I think that kind of says it for itself. February 10th, block out 9 to 11 if you would. That'll be the target for our next meeting. And I'll work on starting to get the agenda. I've got a couple of notes from the items that were talked about here. So I'll make sure I get those out and get that ball rolling, but that's what we'll plan on for the time being. Obviously, the offline things we'll be following up with the various items that came up in discussion that we'll need to chase out. So one last call around the horn, open call. Anything else? Okay, hearing none, we're adjourned. Gang, if I don't talk to you beforehand, have a great, safe holiday. Thanks as always for everything. Be good, be safe, be well, and we'll see you guys